Hello, 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 friends. Welcome to a new episode of the Problematic FMC podcast. This week, I'm sharing an interview with a romance-focused bookstagrammer at most.lyromance. That's at most.lyromance. I'll have her handle in the show notes for you to go check her page out. But first, I'd like to share some reviews of some recent books I've read. Keeping with the theme, these books are mostly romances. Over the holiday break, I read Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman. Kathleen Rosenberg is all that's left of whirlwind pop star Katie Rose. Her bitter ex, Ryan Leneve, made sure of it after he discovered her affair with his bandmate, Cal Kirby. Decades later, Cal returns into her life with an opportunity for a leading role in a destined for Broadway show that's literally written for Kathleen. But she's not sure if she can get over her anger about Cal's abandonment after the scandal to work with him. And even more terrifying, has she lost so much of her old life that her talent is buried and gone? Alyssa Sussman masterfully balances a borderline literary style within a formulaic romance novel. Her writing has a certain rhythm, just like a well-produced theater show. I loved the dual timeline, with a few short chapters in a row from the current timeline interspersed with occasional past timelines, which kept up the reading momentum. The flashbacks to their theater days and the scandalous tour gave us the big feelings from a teenage infatuation, but told with fear and desire that only comes from a lot of life lived and wrongs experienced. I often do not like reading about romances featuring high school age characters, and I have serious concerns about adults who primarily write those types of romances. But in this back and forth structure, it gave us a distance that allowed those memories to provide important context while feeling nostalgically relatable. Throughout the story, Kathleen struggles with how much responsibility she holds for the past affair. Some might view her as a selfish has-been who refuses to take responsibility. Others might feel sympathetic and see her as a victim of a society too quick to blame women. I appreciated the realistic and nuanced portrayal of how our minds wrestle with the past, sometimes landing in one place or another, depending on our rapidly changing emotions and situation. Kathleen is absolutely a problematic FMC that will leave readers with thoughts and feelings either way. I think this tension is probably the main reason for the lower relative Goodreads rating, averaging only 3.56 stars. This book is 416 pages and was released in 2023. Again, that is Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman. The other book I have to review today is Guild by Raven Kennedy. Arin's entire world is contained within a cage. A gold cage, but still a prison. Held captive as a token of King Midas's prestige, Arin feels guilty for wishing for more freedoms. When Midas bargains her away, Arin realizes how passive she's grown and must decide whether she's brave enough to face the world beyond her golden bars. My thoughts about this book can be summed up in 2 words: slump buster. I had DNF'd another fantasy book right before this and was worried that my love of fantasy was drying up. But nope, this book gave me all the infatuation of wanting to get through my day to get back to my book. The story has plot twist after plot twist. I thought I knew which way it was going, and it somehow managed to meet those expectations, but still totally shocked me. I appreciated the depiction of Arin as a female character who is both a victim of horrible abuse, but also someone willing to take accountability and grow. All in all, this book was fun and had a really well-crafted plot that I feel fairly confident has a lot more to enjoy as this completed 6-book series continues. This first installment is 402 pages, published in 2020 with an average of 3.60 on Goodreads. Again, that's Guild by Raven Kennedy. Now, let's jump into the interview. Can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Ellen, and I really like to read books. I don't know. I'm a big reader, And I have a really great husband who is a supportive partner and a really cool kid, and she's pretty great. And I have a day job that I really like, but if I could read all day, that would be most ideal.
I'm the same way. It's really hard not to compare myself to other readers sometimes who are maybe in school or have a different schedule and don't have that kind of 8 to 5 commitment because I certainly wish that I could read all day too. How did you get into reading? Is it something you've always done as a kid, or did you start as an adult, or where did that come from?
It's something that I've always been able to do, and I've just always been a big reader. My mom used to tell me a story. She was on the library board of a small town that we lived in, and I would just grab books and read them out loud, and I don't have memory of that. So like I have never not like I've always had the love of reading, and I don't remember learning how to read. I just knew how to. And so in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher would always like try to get me to be away from the chapter books and like go to the picture books. And I'm like, oh, I'm done those already. I want to go to the Babysitters Club and the Sweet Valley Kids and High eventually. And my kindergarten teacher was very frustrated because she was like, here is the Franklin. You need to read Franklin. And I'm like, no, no, thank you.
Been there, done that. That's such a fun story. So obviously your reading tastes have changed a bit from looking at your Instagram now compared to like the Babysitters Club and things like that. So how would you describe your reading tastes now?
Well, I've always been really into like stories about love and not necessarily like romance, but even as like a preteen, all of my YAs were like, oh, cute little puppy love type things. I really liked Tamora Pierce growing up. She was my number one. I just loved the Alana series and having that fantasy aspect. And then Alana also gets to be like a feminine girl who falls in love. Not only is she like kicking butts and doing stuff with her sword, she's also able to fall in love and like meet the love of her life after a couple guys. Like there's not a one true person. It's like, well, she needs to date and she needs to have this whole rounded character, which I really loved. So then that continued to segue into stealing my mom's romance novels, which I'm sure she didn't really love. But at the same time, I was like, I am 16. I need to read these romance novels. And then now I just read as much as I can. And that's the genre that I love the most. But I will read thrillers and nonfiction, and I love Indigenous reads. I try to read well-roundedly, but I also just go back to my niche because I love it so much.
I'm the exact same way. I've been looking at my 2024 statistics and it's overwhelmingly romance. But I'm one that I like to like read a romance and then something else and romance and something else because I feel like I don't enjoy the romance as much if it's back to back to back. So I also like to vary up the genres. So it sounds like you've been reading all your life. What led you to start your Bookstagram account?
I read a book last year, and it was a book that like found me at the right time, right place. And it was called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. And it still remains my number one book. Like I reread it this year. It makes me cry to this day. And I really connected with it. So I wrote my very first review for it. And once I read that or wrote that review, I was like, I need to read the second book, which I knew was coming out sometime in 2024. And so I made it my goal to be able to get that book as an arc. And so I needed an audience to get that arc. I needed to like, and then that it just kind of snowballed from there. So it was started with a book, and then I needed to have an audience. And then I'm like, how do I get more people? Oh, I need to post pretty pictures. And then that branched out into threads. And then I will hold people captive by talking about books as much as I can.
That's so true. So I'm working on a post right now about like things I wish I knew when I started NetGalley. And I think one of the things that's really stood out to me is that I thought you needed an audience at the beginning. Have you found that that audience helps you get books, or is it something that is kind of a myth?
I think it doesn't detract from
Mm-hmm.
getting books at
Yeah.
the same time that like I wasn't like when I started out, I didn't get the books that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was able to get the like read now books, and
Right.
like if you go that route and you're willing, like I'm such a big mood reader that it didn't really work for me. And I have to limit my arcs to like, these are the books that I want to read. And so it was harder for me. And I went through a big, I don't want to say slump. I just went through a big arc not applying for, and I'd apply for like one Berkeley and then get immediately rejected.
Oh,
And then I'd apply for one other that I was excited for and then get rejected. So I thought maybe for the like in demand ones, I needed more of an audience. And
uh-huh.
that not to detract from other amazing books, but I was just like, if I'm mood reading what I really want, then I need to go from that instead of just the variety.
That's really cool. So you've had some decent time like in the community and interacting with other bookstagrammers. Is there anything that you wish you could change about the bookstagram or just the bookish online community as a whole?
I don't think so. I really enjoy talking about books, and I really love when people love talking about books. And I found that community really well. And I really love interacting with those kinds of people. When people are just on there to get numbers or get their 5 minutes of fame, maybe it's not as great of an interaction, honestly. And I don't tend to make connections with those type of people. So it's not that I want them to change. It's just like I'm not really into that aspect as much. But at the same time, everybody loves books the way that they love books. And so if their goal is to be a book influencer, then like they're in it for whatever they're going for, but it's just maybe not showcasing as much that they love books.
I've found that just being a part of the readerly community and just finding someone, even if their book tastes don't really overlap with mine, them just loving books, I feel like it's such a deeper connection than if I was to find someone who was like posting the same type of dog or something. I feel like books do kind of give you that deeper level with a person that you meet online.
Definitely. And even if you have somebody that doesn't read the same, like I have friends that are just thrillers.
Mm.
Or my favorite book this year, one of my good friends read it and DNF'd it. And I was like, are you kidding me? But we still have giant conversations about other books that we love, or just in general, like we have a conversation back and forth about Canada Post and pigeons in Canada Post because it takes so long for Canada Post to mail anything. So there's like a full conversation about that, even though we don't agree on the same books.
Oh, wait, I'm a stupid American. What is pigeon?
It's just I was sending something to Australia and for this friend, and I was like, "Oh, I can get it to Australia by mailing it through our like UPS or
Okay,
USPS or
okay.
whatever, the Canadian version of that, and I'll get it to you in like 3 weeks." And then I messed up at the post office and mailed it to her by boat. And Canada Post was like, "We'll get it to Australia in like 3 months."
Oh
So then
no.
we had this whole like carrier pigeon back and forth about like that poor pigeon's going to be so exhausted once he flies there after 3 months. Anyway,
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
yes,
That's really frustrating. I have some Australian authors that I love and getting their books. And like sometimes they'll print them in the US, but I want like their original book covers, and that's always such a headache to get those. So
yes,
I do get
exactly.
that. I've been loving your 2024 reading wrap up, and so there might be some overlap with that on Instagram with this next question. But what are some books that you've read and loved recently?
Right now, I save my end of the year for bonkers books, and those are indie ones that are just like I love them. I say bonkers with the like kindest, like I want something that is so weird. So it's the like inanimate objects. It's the it's the like, what am I reading? A rejected fated mate. Like they're bonkers and they're so much fun. So that's what I've been enjoying right now. And then for all of 2024, I do this reading wrap up where I have honorable mentions, which are coming out soon. But I pick my top 9 books of the year, and my top is Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. And I actually flew to New York to meet her for the book. It was like a Barnes and Noble like book meetup, and I dragged my mom along with me. I'm like, "Do you ever want to go to New York?" And she's like, "No." And I'm like, "Too bad, we're going to New York. Sorry, let's go." But it's just another way that books can connect people, and I got to meet people there, and I forced my mom to read the book, and it was just a magical time.
That's really cool. I've kind of been wanting to go to New York just to visit some of the bookstores there. Were there any destinations or anything that you visited that I would have to check out?
I got to go to the Rip Bodice, which is like the romance bookstore there. And it was the hottest day that we were in New York, and it's in Brooklyn. So I was like, oh, let's walk across the Brooklyn Bridge to my mom. And it's like so hot. So we got off the bridge and we didn't think to pack water. So we just got to the first bodega, first thing that we could find to chug bottles of water. And then we walked to the Rip Bodice, and they have like a whole wall of signed by the author books. And so I got a couple books there, and then I had to transport them back. I only had carry-on, but it was 100% worth it.
That sounds really, really fun. I've been following them on Instagram and so definitely need to check them out. So that's getting to the end of my questions. Do you have anything else that you want to share, or you can just go ahead and plug yourself where people can find you online?
Sure. I just love reading and I like connecting with people about books. And I am most.lyromance. And I read everything, but mostly romance.
Great, great. And I'll put direct links in the post to your handles so that way people can go find you. But thanks so much for hopping on. This has been a really fun conversation. I also love reading and talking books, so it's been so fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
That is all for today's episode. What do you think? Do you relate to Ellen's story of never remembering a time when you couldn't read? Have you ever had a friend read a book that you loved but it just didn't land the same for them? Let me know in the comments or on Instagram. I am at problematicfmc on Instagram, and you can find Ellen at most.lyromance. Again, that's most.lyromance. I have a link to her page in the show notes. Until next time, keep flipping those pages. Bye!